My name is Nicole Dennis, and I am a major in the United States Army. Last Thursday evening, at the senior officers' housing area at Fort Bragg, I was carrying a tray of ribbies out to my husband, Dominic, and his friends. As I approached the back patio screen door, I heard his smug voice. "I doubt this sham of a marriage lasts another year. She's just not in my league anymore." His friends laughed, raising glasses of Pappy Van Winkle, the bourbon I'd stood in line for 8 hours to buy for our anniversary. Nathan's voice cut in. "She's as rigid in bed as she is in formation." Dominic laughed loud. "My lawyer says I've got a solid case for half her military pension." They thought I was just a rigid military machine. They forgot the machine is the one that plans the war. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by the very person you trusted most. The Carolina air was crisp, carrying the first real chill of October, but the back patio was warm. The fire pit, a heavy brushed metal basin I'd bought with my last deployment bonus, was throwing off a comfortable heat. The smell of hickory charcoal from the grill was rich, mixing with the sharp, sweet scent of aged bourbon. I'd been running a field training exercise for 72 hours straight. My bones ached and my eyes were gritty with a fatigue that no amount of coffee could touch. But this was Thursday. This was our routine. Major Dennis ran the field. Nicole Dennis, the wife, ran the household. And Thursday was Dominic's barbecue night. I felt a quiet prickle of satisfaction, the kind that comes from completing a mission. I'd managed to get back to post, shower, change, and get the steaks marinating before his friends, Nathan, Trevor, and Marcus, arrived. They were all dependas, a term we used for military spouses, men who had, in theory, put their own careers on hold to follow their wives. I'd always felt a twinge of sympathy for them. Now, I plated the thick-cut ribeyes, perfectly seared, and balanced the heavy ceramic tray. I was tired, yes, but I was also content. I was being a good wife. I was balancing the demanding scales of my career and my home life. As I slid my hand toward the screen door handle, their voices drifted through the mesh, clearer than I expected. They were laughing. It was a deep, smug laughter, the kind men share when they believe they're safe, unobserved. "I'm telling you, Dom, it's a golden parachute," Nathan said. His voice was oily. "She's been so focused on making battalion commander, she doesn't see anything else." My hand froze on the handle. The tray suddenly felt impossibly heavy, the ceramic cutting into my palms. Dominic's voice, the voice I woke up to every morning, joined in. "I doubt this sham of a marriage lasts another year. She's just not in my league anymore." My breath caught. It felt like a physical blow, a precise punch just below the ribs. Sham? Not in his league. I just spent 3 days in the mud and rain, leading soldiers, managing logistics for a multi-million-dollar exercise, and I'd come home to grill him a steak. His friends roared. I saw them through the screen, silhouetted against the fire. They were sitting on the brand-new teak patio furniture I'd ordered, the furniture my bonus had paid for. They raised their glasses. "To Dominic," Trevor chimed in, finally trading up. And I saw the bottle on the table. It wasn't just any bottle, it was the Pappy Van Winkle. The 20-year. The one I had literally stood in a line for 8 hours at the Fayetteville ABC store to get. A line that snaked around the building, just to surprise him for our anniversary. He was serving my sacrifice, my gift, to the men who were celebrating the end of our marriage. Then Nathan spoke again, and his words were the ones that shattered the glass. "She's as rigid in bed as she is in formation." A different kind of cold, one that had nothing to do with the October night, flooded my veins. It was a violation, a deep, personal humiliation shared among men I'd welcomed into my home. Dominic didn't defend me. He just laughed. It was a loud, barking laugh. "My lawyer says I've got a solid case for half her military pension." "Of course you do," Marcus added. "After all the sacrifices you've made for her career, all the years you've had to put your life on hold, you deserve that money to start over." My own sacrifice, the deployments, the missed holidays, the physical toll, the emotional isolation, flashed in my mind. He was twisting my service into his victimhood. He was planning to steal the only thing I had truly earned for myself, my future. Then the conversation shifted, and the blood in my veins turned to ice. Just make sure Project Gaslight is solid, Dominic said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. The pension is one thing, but I need her command taken away. Her ego's been out of control ever since she got selected for battalion. Project Gaslight? My mind, trained for strategic analysis, snapped into focus. Don't worry, Nathan said. The lawyer says we just need to prove she's unstable. Project Gaslight is working perfectly. I've already mentioned to my wife how forgetful Nicole has been. Trevor's wife heard she's been drinking more. Just a few more reports of her forgetting key details or overreacting at a social function. And the command will have to take notice. They'll have to order a psych eval. They weren't just planning to leave me, they were planning to destroy me. They were plotting to use the very system I had dedicated my life to weaponize my service against me and paint me as mentally unstable. This wasn't a divorce. This was an ambush. This was a coordinated attack on my career, my reputation, and my sanity. And the final brutal cut. Nathan, raising his glass of my bourbon, said, "You deserve better, Dom. A real woman, not some copy of General Patton. Just a rigid military machine." Military machine. I stood there, motionless, for exactly 10 seconds. I counted them. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. My training took over. The shock didn't disappear. It crystallized. The crushing weight of betrayal didn't break me. It forged itself into something cold, hard, and absolutely clear. The hurt was still there, a white-hot core, but it was now encased in the ice of a commander's fury. They had made a critical error. They had mistaken my discipline for a lack of passion. They had mistaken my loyalty for blindness. On 10 Mississippi, I moved. I pushed the screen door open. The hinges gave a high, thin squeak that cut through their laughter like a gunshot. 4 men froze, faces turned, mouths half open, eyes wide with the primal fear of being caught. Dominic's smile evaporated, replaced by a pasty, slack-jawed panic. I walked onto the patio. My footsteps were silent on the stone. The only sound was the sizzle of the fat dripping from the grill onto the coals. I walked to the teak table, the one I had assembled myself, and placed the heavy tray of ribeyes in the center. The sound of the ceramic hitting the wood was definitive. Final. I looked at Dominic. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I kept my voice flat, calm, and lethally precise. The voice I used to give an order. Why wait a year? He just stared, uncomprehending. Let's end it today. I turned, my back straight, my chin up. I walked off the patio, through the now silent screen door, and into my house. I left them out there in the cold, with the smell of the steaks they would never eat, the fire, and the deafening dead silence of their own treachery. I didn't grab a coat. I didn't grab my purse. I just grabbed my keys from the ceramic bowl by the door, a bowl I'd bought on our honeymoon in Key West, and walked out of the house I'd paid for. The drive was short, maybe 10 minutes across post, but it felt suspended in time. The streetlights of Fort Bragg blurred past the windows of my Jeep, haloed in the damp October air. I drove past the 82nd Airborne Division headquarters, past the rows of neatly parked Humvees, symbols of order and discipline. My world. A world where loyalty was everything, where your word was your bond, where a threat was identified, analyzed, and neutralized. And I had been living with one in my own home for years. I pulled up to the BOQ, the Bachelor Officers' Quarters. It's the military's version of a sterile, no-frills hotel, a place for temporary duty, or, in my case, domestic emergencies. I walked to the front desk, the fabric of my OCPs, my combat uniform, rustling with each step. I was still wearing it. I hadn't even had the thought to change. "Checking in, ma'am," the young specialist at the desk asked, his eyes politely avoiding the fact that I was a major checking into temporary lodging at 2100 on a Thursday. "Yes, specialist, just for tonight." I pulled out the emergency credit card I keep in a pocket on my body armor, separate from my wallet. a card I'd always assumed I'd use if my car broke down on a highway, not if my marriage did. He handed me a key card. Room 217. The room was exactly what I expected. Beige walls, a bed with a stiff patterned bedspread, a government-issue desk, and a faint, lingering smell of industrial cleaner. It was temporary. It was impersonal. It was safe. I locked the door, the deadbolt sliding home with a heavy thud. The sound echoed in the small room, and it was that sound, that final definitive click of isolation, that finally broke the dam. The cold fury that had carried me out of the house evaporated, and it just left. I was empty. I sat on the edge of the stiff bed, my hands still clenched at my sides, and for the first time in hours, I allowed myself to collapse. I didn't just cry. It was a complete unraveling. The sobs were deep, ragged, and humiliating. They tore out of my chest, fueled by a shame so profound it choked me. I wasn't crying for lost love. The man I loved, I realized, had probably never existed. I was crying for the fool. For me. I was crying for the humiliation of it all. I am Major Nicole Dennis. I lead soldiers. I analyze complex battlefield intelligence. I can spot a threat from a mile away. But I couldn't spot the one sleeping next to me. I had applied the Army value of loyalty, unquestioning, absolute loyalty, to a traitor. And he had used that loyalty, my own code of honor, as his primary weapon. The military machine, Nathan had called me. Maybe they were right. I saw all the external threats but missed the cancer growing inside. I pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes, trying to force the memories back, but they came anyway. The red flags I had dutifully, stupidly painted green. I remembered when I was promoted to captain. I was so proud. I'd pinned on the dual silver bars, and I felt that sense of accomplishment, of moving forward. Dominic had just been laid off from another sales job he'd claimed wasn't challenging enough. I came home, wanting to celebrate with a bottle of champagne. He was sitting on the sofa, in the dark, watching ESPN with the sound off. I uncorked the bottle, the pop sounding too loud in the quiet room. "Guess who's a captain?" I said, trying to sound cheerful. He didn't look at me. He just took a long pull from his beer. "So that's it then," he said, his voice flat. "You're Captain Dennis's now. You're the boss. Guess you won't be needing me much longer, will you? You're leaving me behind." The joy vanished, instantly replaced by a cold, slithering guilt. He hadn't said congratulations. He had taken my success and twisted it into an act of abandonment, an attack on him. I spent the rest of my promotion night apologizing, reassuring him that his role was just as important, that my career was our career. And I remembered the finances. Oh God, the finances. Dominic had always handled them. "Babe, you're brilliant at military stuff," he'd say, ruffling my hair. "But you're too trusting. You're naive about money. Let me handle the investments and the bills. You just focus on being a soldier." And I let him. I was grateful. It was one less thing on my plate. I signed the power of attorney papers. I gave him access to all my accounts. I was a major in the U.S. Army, and I was getting an allowance from my own husband, paid from my own salary. I saw it even then, but I told myself it was partnership. It was division of labor. Tonight, sitting in this sterile BOQ room, I saw it for what it was. It wasn't partnership. It was isolation. It was a calculated move to sever my control, to make me dependent on him for my own money, to prepare for the day he would try to take it all. Project Gaslight hadn't started last week. It had been underway for years. But the worst memory, the one I kept buried under mountains of field manuals and deployment orders, clawed its way to the surface. Afghanistan, 6 years ago. I was on deployment, running operations out of Bagram. It was a brutal tour. We were taking a lot of contact, and I was pregnant. We'd been trying for a while, and it had finally happened. I was terrified, but I was also hopeful. It was a small, secret piece of light in a very dark place. Then, at 14 weeks, I miscarried. It happened violently, quickly, in the middle of the night on the cold floor of a plywood hut. When I was stable, I got to a satellite phone to call him. I needed my husband. I was broken, I was bleeding, I was 7,000 miles from home, and I had just lost our child. I was sobbing so hard I could barely speak. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, just static. I remember thinking the call had dropped. Dominic? I whispered. Did you hear me? His voice came back, not sad, not comforting. It was cold, analytical. Yeah, I heard you, he said. And then he said the words that I would never, ever forget. Maybe it's a sign, Nicole. You've been so focused on the job. You're always in the field, always gone. You chose your career over being a mother. I'd collapsed. I believed him. For 6 years, I carried that. I believed that my ambition, my service, my very nature had cost me my child. I believed I was unworthy of being a mother. If you've ever had your deepest pain used against you by someone you loved, please just hit that like button to show some support. And if you've ever seen a red flag in someone that everyone else missed, comment red flag below. You are not alone in this. Tonight, the cold, hard truth hit me. Dominic's words. They hadn't been the clumsy lashing out of a grieving husband. He hadn't been grieving at all. It was a tactic. It was a calculated, cruel, strategic move to break me, to instill a core of self-doubt so deep I would never challenge him again. He had used the worst moment of my life as a tool of manipulation. The crying stopped. The ice was back. The tears stopped. The realization hadn't just brought pain. It had brought a terrible, clarifying cold. The ice was back. I stood up from the stiff polyester bedspread. My legs were numb, but they held me. I walked into the small, fluorescent-lit bathroom. The face that stared back at me from the cheap, government-issue mirror was a wreck. My eyes were swollen, red-rimmed. My hair was matted on one side from where I'd been lying down. I looked like a victim. I hated it. I turned the faucet, pushing past the warm and straight to sea. The water hit my hands, shockingly cold. I cupped it and splashed it onto my face. Once, twice, a third time. The frigid water was a physical shock, a tactical reset. It was the same thing I did in the field when I hadn't slept in 48 hours and needed to be sharp for a briefing. It was a baptism of cold fury. I grabbed the starchy, thin towel from the rack and scrubbed my face dry. I didn't just wipe away the tears, I wiped away the fog of betrayal. I wiped away the weeping, blindsided wife. When I looked in the mirror again, Major Dennis was looking back. Her eyes were still red, but they were no longer weak. They were focused. My mission was clear. This was no longer a personal crisis. This was an internal security threat. I walked back into the room and unzipped my duffel bag. I pulled out my government-issued laptop. It's not a sleek, silver personal machine. It's a thick, black, ruggedized Panasonic Toughbook, heavy and built for war zones. It's a tool. I sat at the small desk, plugged it in, and booted it up. The familiar secure access login screen appeared. I entered my 20-character password. My fingers didn't hesitate. I opened my encrypted file container. This was my personal space, more secure than any bank vault. This bare, beige BOQ room was no longer a refuge. It was now my tactical operations center. My talk. My mind, trained in the military decision-making process, began to move. Mission: neutralize threat. Protect assets, secure career. Enemy: Dominic. Hostile, primary target: Nathan, Trevor, Marcus. Co-conspirators: time frame: immediate. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I created a new master folder. I didn't title it Divorce. I titled it Operation Counter-Strike. Inside, I created the subfolders just as I would for any mission profile. Folder 1, Joint Assets. The house, the bank accounts, the investments I'd been too naive to manage. Folder 2, Nicole's service record. My OERs, my awards, my commendations, my fitness reports, every piece of paper that proved who I was. Folder 3, Dominic's financial failures. Every time he'd lost a job, every investment that had gone south, the paper trail I'd ignored. And finally, a fourth folder, the name of their operation, the name of my war. Folder 4, Project Gaslight. I stared at the name. Now I had a target. But a commander needs assets. I picked up my personal cell phone. My hand, which had been so steady on the keyboard, hesitated. This was the next step. And it was the hardest, admitting failure. As an intelligence officer, my job is to see the threat, to analyze the patterns, to predict the enemy's move. And I had failed. I had let the enemy sleep in my bed, eat my food, and plot my destruction from inside my own command post. The shame was heavy, a physical weight in my chest. Making these calls meant admitting that failure to the outside world. It meant being exposed. I squeezed my eyes shut, and a face flashed in my memory. Not Dominic's. It was from a mandatory leadership seminar I'd sat through at the Pentagon last year. A speaker on a video screen. That woman, the researcher from Texas, Brené Brown. I'd been half listening, grading papers, but one thing she said had stuck. A quote that all the female officers had written down. "Vulnerability is not weakness," she'd said. "It's our greatest measure of courage." I dismissed it then as soft academic talk. Now, in this sterile room at 2 a.m, I understood. Making this call, exposing my failure, wasn't weakness. It was the first, most courageous act of this entire counteroffensive. I took a deep, steadying breath. I opened my contacts and found the name, Patricia Winters, attorney at law, the best and most ruthless military divorce lawyer in Fayetteville. I pressed dial. It was 0200, but her website said 24/7 emergency line. A groggy voice answered. "Winters' office." "This is Major Nicole Dennis," I said, my voice firm. "I need to speak with Ms. Winters. It's an emergency." "Ma'am, it's 2 a.m. "It's an emergency," I repeated. "Tell her it's about an internal security breach." The line clicked. I waited. A new voice, sharp, awake, and all business, came on. "This is Patricia Winters. Ms. Winters, this is Major Nicole Dennis. I have a situation." The shame rose up again, hot in my throat. "I need an emergency restraining order. I need an immediate freeze on all joint assets. My husband, he is actively plotting to subvert my career." There was a silence on the other end, but it was a calculating silence. "Major Dennis," Patricia said finally, her voice like ice, "I'm glad you called. Your husband, Dominic, tried to retain my services 3 hours ago." My blood ran cold. "What?" "It's a classic shark move. He tried to consult with me to conflict me out, to prevent me from representing you. It's the first thing abusers do. I declined him. His story didn't add up." She paused. "I've been waiting for your call. Be at my office at 0800. We start the offensive." She hung up. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, a small victory. He was sloppy. I had my legal counsel. One call down, one to go. This one was harder, more personal. I dialed the number I knew by heart, my command sergeant major, my top. CSM Evans. He answered on the second ring. His voice was wide awake, professional, not a trace of sleep in it. "Evans." "Top," I said, my voice thick with emotion I hadn't expected. "It's Major Dennis. I apologize for the hour." "No apology needed, ma'am." "What's the situation? Unit status?" "The unit is fine. I'm not." "Top, I'm at the BOQ. I have a severe personal situation. It's contained, but it's bad." I had to force the next words out. This went against every fiber of my being as a commander. "You're going to hear things, Top. Rumors. Strange things about me. They might come from inside the spouses club. They are part of a coordinated effort. I need you to hold the line. I need you to trust me, even if what you hear sounds bad." There was a 10-second pause. I heard him breathe. CSM Evans was a 30-year veteran. He'd seen everything. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice was the sound of bedrock. "I don't listen to rumors. I follow my commander. Your command? The unit is secure. You do what you need to do. I'll see you at PT." He hung up. I closed my eyes. The shame I'd felt calling the lawyer was washed away by a profound wave of gratitude. This was loyalty. Not the empty promises of a marriage, but the steel-forged bond of the uniform. My army family was my true family. I wasn't alone. I turned back to the laptop. The fatigue was still there, a heavy cloak on my shoulders, but the determination was a fire in my belly. I had my legal asset. I had my unit secured. I clicked open the Project Gaslight folder. The screen was bright in the dark room. I was no longer a wife crying on a bed. I was a commander. And I was planning a war. I was staring at the glowing, empty folder on my laptop screen. Project Gaslight. My strategy was sound. My assets were in place. Patricia was my legal counsel. CSM Evans my operational support. But I had no tactical intelligence, no proof. I was a commander with a battle plan, but no ammunition. The entire operation hinged on what was inside that empty folder. It was 00:30, half past midnight. The silence in the BOQ was absolute, broken only by the low hum of the ventilation system. Then, a sound. A soft, hesitant knock on my door. I went rigid. My heart didn't just beat, it kicked, a hard, sudden jolt against my ribs. No one knew I was here except Patricia and my top. Neither of them would come knocking like this, which meant someone else knew. He knew. Was this it? Was Dominic here to finish it? To escalate? I moved silently, my bare feet on the thin carpet. I didn't approach the door. I moved to the side, my back against the wall, my hand on the deadbolt, my eyes locked on the peephole. I held my breath. Another knock, this time a little more urgent. Major Dennis. A man's voice, muffled but familiar. My stomach twisted. It was Nathan, one of them. One of the men from the porch. I didn't move. This could be a trap. Dominic could be standing just out of sight, phone recording, waiting for me to overreact so he could have his proof. Major Dennis, please. Nathan's voice cracked. We need to talk to you. Please, it's about Dominic. I listened. I heard another voice, a woman's. Just open the door, Nicole, she said. Her voice was steady, firm. He's an idiot, but he's not a threat right now. I am. I didn't recognize her voice. I slowly leaned toward the peephole. Nathan was standing there, but he wasn't the arrogant man from the barbecue. He looked pathetic. He was wearing cargo shorts and a t-shirt, his hair a mess, his face pale. He looked like he'd been thrown out. Beside him stood a woman I recognized vaguely from unit functions. Sophie, Nathan's wife, an army nurse, worked at Womack. She was in scrubs, looking like she'd just gotten off a shift. And she looked furious. I slowly undid the deadbolt and opened the door, but only as far as the security latch would allow. The metal chain was taut. Sophie didn't flinch. She looked straight at me, through the gap. Major Dennis, I'm Sophie, Nathan's wife. I know who you are, Sophie, I said, my voice low. Good, she said. Then you know I'm a captain in the nurse corps. I took an oath to do no harm, and I am not going to stand by while my husband participates in a conspiracy to destroy another woman, let alone another officer. She looked at Nathan, her disgust so potent I could feel it. My husband is a coward, ma'am. But tonight, he's trying to do the right thing. Because I made him. Nathan wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at his feet. What is this, Sophie? I asked. She held up a small black object. A USB drive? This is everything, she said. This is Project Gaslight. Now, are you going to let us in? I undid the latch. They stepped inside. Nathan immediately moved to the far wall, as if trying to make himself small. Sophie, however, walked right up to the desk, her eyes scanning my laptop, the empty folders, the whole scene. She understood instantly. You already knew, she said. It wasn't a question. I heard them, I said. Tonight. We figured, she said. I found the group chat on Nathan's iPad. He forgot to log out. I've been reading it for 3 weeks. She said it so calmly, but her hands were shaking. He told me it was just guy talk, she spat, glancing at Nathan. Venting. Then I read what they were actually planning. She turned back to me and held out the drive. It's all in here. 3 weeks of screenshots. I downloaded every conversation, every picture, every file. My hand was steady as I took it from her. I slid it into the USB port. The icon popped up on my screen. I clicked it. The folder opened. It was all there, dozens of files. I opened one, a screenshot of the chat. Dominic. We need to establish the unstable narrative. Need a few more reports of her forgetting things. Trevor. Easy. Linda's already convinced she's paranoid. Nathan. LOL. The military machine is starting to rust. I felt sick. I clicked on another file. It was a photo of me at a unit function, laughing with a group of my soldiers, including CSM Evans. Dominic, or one of them, had circled my face and my tops. The caption underneath, written by Dominic. See what I mean? Way too close with her NCOs. Inappropriate relationship? They were twisting my professionalism, my command relationship, into something vile. A classic, disgusting, sexist trope. But the next file was the one that stopped my breathing. It was a document, a timeline. Phase 1, established pattern of erratic behavior. The forgetting things, the paranoia. Phase 2, introduce substance abuse. Dominic's job was to plant empty bottles, claim I was using sleeping pills. Phase 3, the intervention. My eyes scanned the text. They had a date, next Friday. They were planning to coordinate reports to the brigade chaplain and my commander, Colonel Miller, expressing grave concern for my mental health. They were going to use their status as concerned husbands to force me into a mandatory psychological evaluation. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just my pension. They were going to have me declared mentally unfit. They were going to make me lose my command. They were going to destroy my entire 20-year career. This was it. The whole sickening sociopathic plan. I looked up from the screen, my vision narrowing. I felt the ice not just in my veins, but coating my bones. Sophie was watching me. They want to ruin you, she whispered, her nurse's composure finally cracking. Just because you're you. And he's not. The bitter truth of it hung in the air. The petty, jealous rage of a man living in the shadow of his wife's success. As if on cue, as the clock on my laptop clicked over to 0300, my phone buzzed on the desk. A number I didn't recognize. I answered, putting it on speaker. Dennis. A shaky voice. Nicole? Is this Major Dennis? This is she. Who is this? This is Linda. Linda Chin. Trevor's wife. My eyes met Sophie's. She nodded. Nicole, I'm so sorry. Linda's voice was a rush of panic. I'm at my sister's house. I had to get out. My husband. He came home drunk tonight, bragging. Bragging about what, Linda? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. About Dominic. About the plan. About Project Gaslight. About how they were going to get all this money from you. How Dominic was going to have you put away. He's a monster, they all are. She was crying now. I started recording him on my phone. I got it all, Nicole. I got him bragging about the whole thing. I'm filing for divorce in the morning. I'll send you the file. I'm so sorry. She hung up. The room was silent again. I looked at Nathan, cowering by the wall. I looked at Sophie, her face a mask of resolve and shame. Then I looked back at my laptop. The Project Gaslight folder wasn't empty anymore. It was full. The screenshots, the timeline. And now, an audio file on its way. My hand was no longer shaking. I had my ammunition. I had my weapons. I didn't sleep. After Sophie and Nathan left, I spent the next 2 hours in that cold BOQ room, the glow of the laptop screen painting my face blue. I went through every file on that USB drive, every screenshot, every message, every poisoned word. I read them until the initial shock and rage wore off, and all that was left was a cold, hard certainty. Then Linda Chin's audio file came through. I put in my earbuds and listened. I heard the clinking of ice in a glass, the slurred, boastful voice of her husband, Trevor. And I heard him, in vivid, drunken detail, lay out Dominic's entire plan to have me declared mentally unfit. My weapons, as I'd called them, were laid out on the desk. The digital evidence, the audio file. It was all there. I spent the last hour before dawn staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the air conditioner. Linda's last words to me echoed in my head. They won't stop. I knew she was right. The timeline I'd read proved it. Their Phase 3 was scheduled for next week. But I was wrong about the timeline. They weren't waiting. At 0600, exactly as the first gray light of dawn filtered through the blinds, a notification popped up on my government laptop. It wasn't a standard email. It was a high-priority calendar invite from the Brigade XO. My heart didn't just sink, it plummeted. The subject line was sterile, official. Subject, meeting with Brigade Commander, time, 1000. Location, Brigade HQ, conference room. Attendees, COL Miller, MAJ Dennis. Notes, regarding an urgent personal matter. I stared at the words. An urgent personal matter. He'd done it. He'd struck first. He must have realized something was wrong when I didn't come back. He'd panicked and accelerated his plan. While I was gathering my weapons, he was already on the battlefield, firing the first shots. I was reaching for my phone to call Patricia when it buzzed on the desk beside me. Her name lit up the screen. I snatched it up. He's here, isn't he? I said. No hello. He's not just here, he's desperate. Patricia's voice was sharp, all business. Nicole, Dominic called my office at 5 this morning, crying, tried to hire me. What? It's a classic bottom feeder tactic. It's called conflicting out. He tries to have a consultation with me, even for 5 minutes, so that I'm legally and ethically barred from representing you. It's what panicking, guilty men do. My stomach tightened. He was smarter than I thought. Don't worry, Patricia said, sensing my fear. I saw it coming a mile away. I declined the consultation, told him my dance card was full. His story was sloppy. Too much emotion, not enough facts. He's scared, Nicole. He knows you're gone. He's panicking, and he's making mistakes. He's not just making mistakes, Patricia, I said, looking at the calendar invite. He's escalating. He's already gone to my commander. I've been summoned. 10. Damn it, Patricia said. Okay, he's trying to control the narrative. He's setting you up to look unstable before you can file. You walk in there alone, you're on the defensive. I know, I said. I need. My other phone, my government cell, rang on the desk. An internal post number. My blood ran cold. Patricia, I have to call you back. It's the chaplain. I hung up and answered the other line, my voice automatically shifting into its professional register. Major Dennis. Nicole, it's Chaplain Karras. I hope I'm not calling too early. His voice was kind, gentle. Father Karras was a good man. He'd counseled hundreds of soldiers, including some of my own. He was a trusted, sacred part of the system. Not at all, Father. What can I do for you? Son, I'm not breaching any confidentiality here, he sounded troubled. But your husband Dominic, he came to see me this morning. He was here at my office at 0500. My knuckles went white on the phone. 0500. Before the email. Before the call to Patricia. This was his first, most diabolical move. He's very worried about you, Nicole. The chaplain continued, his voice full of practiced empathy. He's deeply concerned for your mental and spiritual well-being. He says you've been under an immense amount of stress. I said nothing. I just listened to the click of the trap. He mentioned you seemed disconnected, despondent. Nicole, he said he was afraid you might be having thoughts of self-harm. He used the words suicidal ideation. There it was, the silver bullet, the words that, in a military command, change everything. He hadn't just gone to my boss. He'd gone to the spiritual heart of the brigade. He had weaponized the one system designed to offer soldiers a safe, confidential place to seek help. He had taken the sacred trust between a soldier and a chaplain, and he had poisoned it. He was painting me as a victim, not of his abuse, but of my own unstable mind. It was brilliant, and it was the most evil thing I had ever encountered. "Father," I said, and I was proud of how steady my voice was. "I can assure you, I am not a danger to myself. I am fine." "I'm so glad to hear that, Nicole, truly." But he was very convincing. He was in tears. "I'm sure he was," I said, my voice like ice. "Father, I am on my way to a meeting with Colonel Miller at 10. I believe this is all part of the same, coordinated issue. I will explain everything then." Of course," he said, sounding relieved. "I'll be there as well. The colonel requested my presence. Just take care of yourself, Major." He hung up. I put the phone down. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the parking lot. The fear I'd been holding back now washed over me. This wasn't a fair fight. I'd seen it happen before. Good female officers, sharp as tacks, their careers completely derailed by a whisper, a rumor about an affair, a hint of emotional instability during a divorce. The Army, for all its progress, was still a boys' club in so many ways. Colonel Miller was a good man, but he was a traditional man, an old-school infantry officer. What would he see at 10 Narcs? Would he see his trusted major, his future battalion commander? Or would he see a hysterical, unstable woman and a tearful, concerned husband being comforted by the brigade chaplain? Dominic wasn't just attacking me. He was using the system's inherent biases against me. All my evidence, all my screenshots, all my years of flawless service, would any of it matter against the convincing performance of a distraught man? For a second, I felt the panic rise up. The same desperate, clawing feeling I'd had in Afghanistan. I was surrounded. And just like in Afghanistan, the panic sharpened into a single point of action. I would not let him control this battlefield. I would not walk into that room on the defensive. I grabbed my personal phone. I dialed Patricia. "He weaponized the chaplain," I said. "He'll be at the 10-team meeting. Dominic's playing the concerned husband card." "Of course he is," Patricia said, her voice disgusted. "It's the abuser's playbook, page 1. He's the victim." "He won't be for long," I said. I looked at the laptop, at the USB drive, at the audio file from Linda. "I'm not walking into that room cold. I'm going on the offensive." "What are you saying, Nicole?" "I'm saying you're my lawyer. I'm your client. But Colonel Miller, he's my commander, and he does not walk into an ambush." I took a deep breath. "Send it," I commanded. "Send what?" "Everything. The whole package, the screenshots, the Project Gaslight timeline, Linda Chin's audio recording. Email it to Colonel Miller's government account. Right now. Mark it, for commander's eyes only. Urgent personal matter." There was a pause. I heard her typing. "This is it, Nicole," she said. "Once you do this, the war has started." "The war started last night," I said. "It's time my commander had the right intelligence report." The send button clicked. It was done. The digital package, the screenshots, the audio file, the timeline, was now in Colonel Miller's inbox. The preemptive strike was launched. I had exactly 3 hours until 1000. 3 hours to transform myself from a woman who had spent the night weeping in a BOQ into the officer my commander trusted. I stood under a scalding hot shower, the water drumming against my skin, and let the last of the tears and the panic wash away. When I stepped out, I was no longer a victim. I was a soldier preparing for contact. I began the ritual. I pulled my Class A uniform, the Army service uniform, from the garment bag I kept in my car for emergencies. This wasn't my daily camouflage. This was the formal dark blue suit of a professional. The uniform of board meetings, of ceremonies, of solemn duty. Today, it was my armor. I laid each piece out on the sterile motel bedspread with practiced precision. The skirt, the jacket, the shirt. I ironed the white shirt until the creases were as sharp as a knife's edge. I tied the black four-in-hand necktie, the knot precise. As I was buttoning the shirt, my personal cell phone, the one on the nightstand, buzzed. I glanced at the screen. A number from Ohio. Dominic's mother. My stomach coiled. Of course. He had failed to trap me, failed to conflict out my lawyer, so he had called in his matriarchal air support. I let it ring 4 times, then I answered. My voice was flat. This is Nicole. Nicole. Oh, thank God. Her voice was a practiced quiver of false concern. Honey, what is happening? Dominic called me. He was hysterical. He said you're having some kind of psychological crisis? I said nothing. I just listened. He said you threw him out of the house, she continued, her voice rising. Nicole, how could you? After everything he's done for you. After all the sacrifices he's made for your career, you can't just throw him away like this. He loves you. A white-hot, silent rage flashed behind my eyes. His sacrifices. The man who drank my Pappy Van Winkle while planning to take my pension. The man who had been unemployed for 3 of the last 5 years, living in my house, driving my car while I was in Afghanistan. The manipulation was so blatant, so familiar, it was almost insulting. I cut her off. My voice was no longer flat. It was ice. Ma'am, I said, using the formal term. You should ask your son about Project Gaslight. Project? What? I don't know what that means. He just said you were unstable. You need to ask him what that means, I repeated, my voice leaving no room for argument. And then you should ask him about a woman named Candace in Las Vegas. Do not call me again. I hung up the phone before she could speak another word. I turned back to the mirror. The anger didn't make me shake. It made me focused. His sacrifices. I picked up the jacket of my uniform. It was heavy with metal. My decorations. My service. My eyes locked on one. The Bronze Star. Awarded for meritorious service in a combat zone. I thought of the rocket attack that earned it, the ringing in my ears, the dust, the fear. I looked at another. The Afghanistan Campaign Medal. I thought of the Christmases I missed. The anniversaries spent on a fuzzy video call. The sheer, grinding exhaustion of deployment. I thought of the call. The call where I told Dominic I had miscarried. The call where he blamed my career. This was sacrifice. This was 20 years of my life, my sweat, my blood, etched in metal and ribbon. And that man, that dependa who had sacrificed nothing, thought he could take half of it by calling me crazy. He thought he could trade his lies for my blood. The anger settled, cooling from a raging fire into a solid core of cold, hard steel. This wasn't a divorce, this was a counterintelligence operation. And I would not fail. I slowly, meticulously, pinned my ribbons to the jacket, each one perfectly aligned, 1/8 of an inch above the pocket. This wasn't just my armor, this was my resume. This was my truth. This was the unassailable record of who I was, a record that no lie from a bitter, insecure man could erase. As I prepared to walk out the door, a sudden, clear memory surfaced. My grandmother, a tough-as-nails woman from rural America who raised a family while my grandfather was in Vietnam. I was 19, leaving for basic training, terrified. She'd held my face in her hands and said, "Nikki, you remember this, and you remember it good. The good Lord promised, no weapon formed against you shall prosper." I wasn't a particularly religious woman, but as I stood in that BOQ room, the words echoed in my head, a gift from my ancestor. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Dominic had formed his weapons. The lies, the gaslighting, the manipulation. They would not prosper. I took a deep breath. The anger was gone, replaced by a profound, chilling calm. The calm of a commander, just before the battle commences. I stepped out into the bright North Carolina morning. The walk to brigade headquarters was only a few blocks. Each step was measured, my heels clicking on the pavement in a steady, determined rhythm. It's a terrible feeling, walking into a battle you never asked for, but one you have to win. If you've ever had to put on your own armor, whether it's a uniform or just a brave face, to face someone trying to tear you down, please hit that like button to show some support. And tell me in the comments, what does your armor look like? As I approached the headquarters building, I saw him, CSM Evans, my top. He was standing at the entrance, not casually, but as if on watch. He was in his own full uniform. He must have known this meeting was happening. He was there to bear witness. He didn't say a word. He just watched me approach. As I reached the steps, his eyes met mine, and he gave me one sharp, definitive nod. It said everything. "I'm here, ma'am. The unit is secure. Go handle your business." "Good morning, Top," I said. "Good morning, ma'am." His voice was a low rumble. "The colonel is waiting." I nodded. I pushed open the heavy glass doors and walked into the air conditioning, my footsteps echoing on the polished linoleum floor. The door to the main conference room was open. I stepped inside. The room was long and dark, dominated by a heavy mahogany table. At the far end sat Colonel Miller, his face an unreadable mask. Beside him sat Chaplain Karras, looking deeply uncomfortable. My lawyer, Patricia, was on the left, her briefcase open, and on the right was Dominic. He was already there. He was wearing a civilian suit, an expensive one I'd paid for, and he was dabbing at his eyes with a handkerchief. But as I walked in, his eyes met mine, and he smiled. A small, self-satisfied, smug smile. The smile of a man who thought he had already won. My heart rate didn't spike. It did the opposite. As I saw that smug smile on Dominic's face, the adrenaline from the walk-over vanished, replaced by a sudden, Arctic calm. The training took over. This was no longer my life. It was a tactical problem. I gave a sharp, professional nod to Colonel Miller. "Ma'am," I said, acknowledging my lawyer first, then them. "Colonel, Chaplain." I took my seat beside Patricia. I did not look at Dominic again. I did, however, look at the man sitting next to him. Nathan. My blood turned to ice water. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He was staring at the mahogany table as if it held the secrets to the universe, his face pale and slick with sweat. This was wrong. This was all wrong. This was the man whose wife, Sophie, had given me the USB drive. The man who was trying to do the right thing. And he was sitting on Dominic's side of the table, a co-conspirator, or a hostage. It didn't matter. He was a variable I hadn't accounted for. "Thank you all for being here," Colonel Miller began, his voice flat, revealing nothing. He gestured to a man in a Class A uniform I didn't recognize, sitting next to him. "This is Major Rourke from the JAG office. He's here to observe and advise on behalf of the command." A JAG officer, a lawyer for the Army. My stomach tightened, but I kept my face impassive. This had escalated beyond a personal matter. "Chaplain Karras is also here," Miller continued, "at my request, given the nature of the allegations." "Ma'am," he nodded to Patricia. "I see you are here representing Major Dennis." "That's correct, sir," Patricia said, her voice clear and strong. "And Mr. Dennis," Miller said, turning to Dominic, "you are the one who requested this meeting on an urgent basis. The floor is yours." Dominic took a moment, dabbing his eyes again with the handkerchief. He looked up at Colonel Miller, his face a perfect mask of rehearsed anguish. "Thank you, Colonel," he said, his voice thick with fake emotion. "Sir, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do." He clicked a remote. The large presentation screen at the end of the room lit up. He had prepared a PowerPoint. My poker face held, but inside, I was stunned. The audacity. The sheer, calculated preparation. This was Phase 3. "I'm here," Dominic said, his voice cracking. As a concerned husband. Sir, I love my wife, but I am terrified for her." He clicked to the next slide. "The pressure of her career," he said, shaking his head sadly. "The upcoming command. It's become too much. It's causing a break, a serious mental health crisis, and I am scared she is going to hurt herself." I didn't look at him. I watched Colonel Miller. Miller's face was stone. I've tried to help her, Dominic continued. I've tried to be supportive, but she's been irrational, forgetful, and she's been self-medicating. He clicked the remote again. A new slide appeared. It was a picture. It was me. I was slumped over my desk in my home office, in my PT uniform, completely asleep. The photo was taken from the doorway. I remembered that night. It was 3 weeks ago, right after the 72-hour field exercise. I'd been awake for nearly all of it, and when I got home, I'd sat down to take my boots off and had simply passed out at the desk. I'd slept there for 4 hours until Dominic found me and gently led me to bed, whispering about how hard I worked. He had staged it. I found her like this, Dominic said, his voice choked with a sob. I found this empty pill bottle next to her. He gestured to the photo where, in the corner of the desk, a bottle of Ambien was visible. My prescription. From 6 months ago. One I'd never even finished. She's abusing sleeping pills, sir, Dominic said, looking at the colonel. She's mixing them with alcohol. I'm terrified I'm going to come home one day and find her. Find her. He didn't need to finish the sentence. He had just painted a picture of an unstable, suicidal officer for her commander. The room was silent. I could feel the chaplain's eyes on me, full of pity. I could feel the JAG officer's eyes, sharp and analytical. I did not move. I did not blink. I stared at the screen, at the betrayal. He had weaponized my exhaustion. He had turned my 20 years of service, the very grit the Army demanded of me, into a symptom of a disease. And, sir, Dominic said, his voice dropping, there's more. He clicked the remote, a new slide. My breath caught. It was another photo. This one was from the brigade Christmas party last year. It was me and CSM Evans. We were standing by the punch bowl, laughing. My hand was on his arm, and I was leaning in slightly to hear him over the music. It was a perfectly innocent, normal moment. A commander and her senior enlisted advisor, her top, enjoying a moment of holiday cheer. But Dominic, the master manipulator, had cropped it. He'd zoomed in, making the innocent touch on the arm, the shared laugh, look intimate. I don't know what to think about this, Colonel, Dominic said, his voice dripping with insinuation. Her and Command Sergeant Major Evans, they spend so much time together. Late nights, always working. The room temperature dropped 20 degrees. This was the real attack. This was the Project Gaslight I'd read about. It was a classic, disgusting, sexist, and racist trope. The unstable female officer sleeping with her subordinate. He was trying to destroy 2 careers, 2 families, with one lie. This was not about divorce. This was not about money. This was annihilation. I calmly took out my notebook and a pen from my briefcase. I made a note. I did not look at Dominic. I did not look at the picture. I looked only at Colonel Miller. His jaw was set. His eyes were fixed on the screen. He was a man who had seen combat, and he knew an ambush when he saw one. I could see the muscles in his cheek working. Dominic finished. Sir, I want my wife back. I want her to get help. Before it's too late. He sat down, putting his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent, fake sobs. The performance was complete. The room was suffocatingly silent. The only sound was Dominic's sniffing. I watched Colonel Miller. He sat back in his chair. He looked at Dominic, then at the chaplain, then at the JAG. Then his eyes settled on me. I met his gaze. My back was straight. My hands were steady on my notebook. My poker face was absolute. I was a major in the United States Army, in full uniform, ready to give my report. Colonel Miller, to his credit, did not look at me with pity. He looked at me like the officer I was. He took a slow, deliberate breath. I saw his eyes flick down for just a fraction of a second to a folder on the desk in front of him. The folder Patricia had emailed. He looked back up at me. Thank you, Mr. Dennis. The colonel's voice was a low, dangerous rumble. That was very disturbing. He turned his full attention to me. Major Dennis, do you have anything you wish to present? Colonel Miller's question hung in the air, sharp as a scalpel. Major Dennis, do you have anything you wish to present? Dominic was still sniffing, his head bowed, the picture of the grieving husband. He shot a quick, triumphant glance at me from under his brow, confident his performance had sealed my fate. I stood up. My chair didn't make a sound on the carpet. My voice was clear, cold, and amplified by the sudden, dead silence in the room. Yes, sir, I do. I met Colonel Miller's gaze. Thank you, Colonel. I do not have a presentation regarding my mental health. I nodded to Patricia, who plugged my government laptop into the console. The main screen flickered, then lit up, replacing Dominic's photo of me and CSM Evans. My slide was simple. Black background, white text. It had only 2 words. Project Gaslight. My presentation, I announced, my voice cutting through the silence, is called Project Gaslight. I heard a sharp intake of breath from Dominic. His head snapped up. The fake sobbing stopped instantly, replaced by a pale, wide-eyed shock. His smugness evaporated. On the large video screen at the end of the table, the feed from Division HQ blinked on. General Harrison, the 2-star commander who was overseeing my promotion packet, was now patched in. What in the hell is Project Gaslight? His voice boomed over the speakers. Major Dennis, is this some kind of a joke? No, General, I said, my voice steady. It is not. Dominic shot a panicked look at Nathan. She's lying. She's unstable, sir. This is what I was talking about. She's paranoid. Mr. Dennis, Colonel Miller's voice was a low growl. You will be silent. Continue, Major. I advanced to the next slide. Project Gaslight is a conspiracy conceived by my husband to systematically discredit me, have me declared mentally unfit, and defraud the U.S. Army of my retirement benefits. I clicked. A screenshot of the group chat appeared. This is a chat log between my husband, Mr. Nathan Reed, Mr. Trevor Chin, and Mr. Marcus Cole. Date: 3 weeks ago. I'll read the relevant line from my husband. She's a machine. We just have to convince the Army she's a broken machine. Project Gaslight is a go. Nathan, you're on observation. I clicked again. Another screenshot. Mr. Reed's reply, copy that, I'll start the log. She looks tired today. I clicked again. Mr. Chin's reply, just tell me when you need me to witness an outburst. This pension is as good as ours. The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioner vents. Dominic was white. This is fake. She photoshopped this. Nathan, tell them. All eyes turned to Nathan. He was physically shaking, his face ashen. Mr. Reed, Colonel Miller's voice was lethal. Nathan looked at Dominic, his eyes full of terror. He looked at me, his face full of shame. He looked at the general on the video screen. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly on the floor. Sir, he stammered, his voice cracking. Sir, I... Tell them, Nathan, Dominic hissed, his voice a venomous whisper. Tell them she's a liar. It's true. Nathan choked out, the words tumbling out in a rush. It's all true. I didn't want to. Dominic said, he said it was just a way to get leverage in the divorce. He said she wouldn't be hurt. He promised me a cut. He finally looked at me, tears streaming down his face. Major, I'm sorry. I was wrong. This was a conspiracy. I'll testify. I'll sign anything. My wife, Sophie, she found out. She made me come here. You weak, pathetic idiot! Dominic lunged at him, but he was just an enraged man in a suit, and he stopped short of touching him. Enough, Colonel Miller roared, standing up so fast his own chair nearly toppled. Mr. Dennis, sit down, now! Dominic, stunned by the command, fell back into his chair. I didn't pause. I clicked to the next slide. This is a sworn affidavit from Mrs. Linda Chin, I said, along with a full audio recording of her husband, Trevor, bragging about the plan, which I have already provided to the colonel. Miller nodded grimly. The JAG officer was writing so fast his pen was a blur. But this conspiracy wasn't just about my pension, I continued, my voice dropping. It was about immediate cash flow. Next slide. This is Dominic Dennis Consulting, LLC, a shell corporation registered 6 weeks ago. Next slide. These are emails from that entity's account. In them, Mr. Dennis uses his spousal access to Fort Bragg and my name, my rank, to illicitly solicit contracts from active defense contractors, a clear violation of operational security and ethics regulations. The JAG officer stopped writing and just looked at Colonel Miller. The colonel's face was dark red. This had moved beyond divorce and into potential criminal territory. And finally, I said, this. I clicked to the last slide. It wasn't a chat log. It wasn't an email. It was a bank statement, our joint credit card. The one I paid. The room was dead silent. I pointed to the line item. 2 weeks ago, a charge for $1,245, $50, Delta Airlines. I clicked one last time, the confirmation email. 2 round-trip, first-class tickets from Fayetteville to Las Vegas, and the hotel reservation. 1 king suite, Bellagio Hotel and Casino, 3 nights. Check-in, next Thursday, and the names on the reservation. Mr. Dominic Dennis and Ms. Candace Thorne. I let the image hang in the air. The conference in Las Vegas, I said softly, was scheduled for the exact same week. Project Gaslight was intended to have me committed for a 72-hour psychiatric evaluation. The silence in the room was absolute. It was suffocating. Dominic wasn't moving. He was just staring at the name Candace Thorne on the screen, his mouth open. He had been so focused on his performance that he never, ever thought I would have this. Chaplain Kara slowly took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, his face a mask of profound disappointment. Patricia simply sat, her hands folded. Colonel Miller stood up again, very, very slowly. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at the general on the screen, who just nodded once. When the colonel spoke, his voice was no longer angry. It was dead. Mr. Dennis. Dominic didn't look up. Mr. Dennis, look at me. Slowly, like a man underwater, Dominic raised his head. For 20 years, the colonel said, his voice quiet but shaking with controlled rage, Major Dennis has served this nation. She has led soldiers in combat. She has missed holidays, anniversaries, and God knows what else in service to this army. She's one of the finest officers I have ever had the privilege to command. He pointed a finger at Dominic. And you. You come into my headquarters. You lie to my chaplain. You attempt to subvert my chain of command. You conspire to commit willful, malicious sabotage against a U.S. Army major. His voice rose. You didn't just plan a divorce, Mr. Dennis. Your actions constitute a direct threat to the good order and discipline of this brigade. Your Project Gaslight is a direct assault on the readiness of my command. This is not a family matter. This is a matter of national security. He hit the intercom on his desk. His voice was sharp. Top, send in the MPs. The door opened and 2 military police officers stepped inside, accompanied by CSM Evans. Sir? One of the MPs asked. This man, Colonel Miller said, pointing at Dominic, is to be escorted from this building. He is to be processed for conspiracy and willful sabotage of a U.S. service member. His access to Fort Bragg and any other military installation is hereby permanently revoked. Get him out of my sight, immediately. Dominic just crumpled. The expensive suit, the smugness, the lies, it all collapsed. He was nothing. A hollow shell. Nicole, he whispered, his voice desperate. Nicole, please. Don't let them. I looked at him, not with hate, not with pity, with nothing. He was a variable that had been neutralized. The MPs didn't wait. They each took an arm and hauled him to his feet. He didn't even have the strength to stand. He just sagged between them, his $1,000 shoes dragging on the carpet as they pulled him from the room. The door clicked shut, and the battle was over. The door clicked shut. For a full 10 seconds, nobody in the conference room moved. The silence was heavier than the gunfire I'd heard in Afghanistan. It was the sound of a life being irrevocably altered. Colonel Miller finally broke it. He let out a breath that seemed to carry the weight of the entire morning. He looked at me, his eyes no longer angry, but filled with a deep, professional exhaustion. "Major Dennis," he said, his voice quiet, "you have my profound apologies. I am sorry you had to endure this. Your name is cleared. This meeting, this complaint, is officially expunged. The General sends his regards and his apologies as well." "Thank you, sir," I said. My own voice sounded distant. "Chaplain," the Colonel said, turning, "please, see what you can do for Mr. Reed. He made a terrible mistake, but he came clean." Nathan was still standing where he'd confessed, tears streaming down his face. The chaplain just nodded and walked over, placing a hand on the younger man's shoulder. "And Major," Miller said, looking back at me, "go home. Take the rest of the day. Take the week. Your unit is secure." "Thank you, sir," I said again. Patricia and I stood, gathered our laptops, and walked out of the conference room. The adrenaline was gone. It had drained out of me the moment the MPs hauled Dominic away, leaving behind a hollow, vibrating emptiness. My legs felt like they were filled with sand. As we stepped out into the main hallway of the brigade headquarters, CSM Evans was standing there, as if he'd been waiting. He didn't say much. He just looked at me, his eyes assessing, and gave me a single, sharp nod. "Well done, ma'am," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Thank you, Top," I replied. "Thank you for everything." "Just doing my job, ma'am," he said. And with that, he turned and walked back to his office. That was it. The world was back on its axis. Patricia touched my arm. "Are you okay to drive? I can call you a ride." "I'm fine," I lied. "I just need a minute." "You did the right thing, Nicole," she said. "Call me tomorrow." I nodded, and she walked away, leaving me alone in the hallway. I stood there for a moment, just breathing. The battle was over. I walked out of the HQ building into the bright, cool October sunlight of North Carolina. It felt blinding. And then I saw them. Standing near the parking lot, shifting nervously from foot to foot, were Sophie Reed and Linda Chin. They hadn't left. They had been waiting. The second Sophie saw me, her hand flew to her mouth. Linda just closed her eyes in what looked like relief. I walked toward them, my briefcase feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. When I reached them, nobody spoke. There were no words for this. Sophie just stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me. It wasn't a gentle hug. It was a desperate, fierce embrace, the kind you give someone you pulled from a fire. Then Linda joined, her arms around both of us, and there we stood. 3 women in the middle of a Tuesday morning in the parking lot of a brigade headquarters, holding each other up. 3 women who had been tangled up in the same toxic, manipulative net. And now, all 3 of us were free. We didn't know where to go. It was 3 a.m. After leaving the HQ, I'd gone back to the BOQ and just sat. I sat in my armor, my Class A uniform, for hours. I didn't move. I just stared at the wall, processing the explosion that had just ripped through my life. Finally, Sophie had called. "Are you okay?" "No," I'd answered. "Linda and I are coming to get you," she'd said. "We're going to the Waffle House." And now, here we were, sitting in a bright yellow booth at 3 Saul. Green in the morning, under fluorescent lights that made us all look exhausted and pale. The Waffle House off the main gate of Fort Bragg. It's a 24-hour beacon for soldiers, cops, and anyone whose life doesn't run on a normal schedule. It was perfect. The waitress, a no-nonsense woman named Flo, poured us all coffee. "Tough night, huh, honeys?" she'd asked. "You could say that," Linda murmured. We ordered food, all-star specials, scrambled eggs, bacon, hash browns, toast, comfort food. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the clinking of silverware and the low sizzle from the grill. "So," Sophie said finally, putting down her fork. He's gone." "He's gone," I confirmed, sipping the hot black coffee. "Banned from post, Permanently. Linda let out a long, shaky breath. I filed for divorce this afternoon, she said quietly. As soon as I left Patricia's office, I had the sheriff serve Trevor at his friend's apartment. I'm filing tomorrow, Sophie said, staring into her coffee. Nathan, he's going to cooperate. He'll probably be discharged. But he's broken. We sat there. The ex-wives club, I said a little bitterly. No, Sophie said, looking up at me, her eyes fierce. The survivors club. And we just sat there, drinking coffee until the sky started to turn gray. We talked about lawyers. We talked about finding new places to live. We talked about what next even looked like. We had broken the network. We were free. But we were exhausted. The rumor mill on a military base moves faster than light. They call it the grapevine. Within 48 hours, everyone at Fort Bragg knew. They knew about the showdown at the HQ. They knew about Project Gaslight. They knew about Candace. Dominic's fall was as fast as it was total. He was a dependa with no soldier. He had no house. The lease was in my name. He had no car. The bank repossessed it since he wasn't on the loan I'd paid for. He had no access to the base, no access to the commissary, no access to the status he'd built his entire identity around. About a week later, I got a call from a fellow officer. He was uncomfortable. Ma'am, he said, I thought you should know. I saw Dominic, last night, outside that cheap bar on Hay Street. He was a mess, drunk, screaming into his phone at his mother, I think. Something about money. The officer told me that Dominic had gotten into a shouting match with a bouncer and ended up getting arrested. Not by MPs, by the Fayetteville Civil Police, for being drunk and disorderly. I hung up the phone. I waited for the feeling of triumph. I waited for the, ha ha, you got what you deserved. It never came. I just felt tired. A deep, profound weariness. He wasn't a monster. He was just a small, broken, insecure man. And he was gone. 6 months passed. The divorce was finalized. Patricia was, as always, brilliant. Thanks to the evidence of the conspiracy, the Project Gaslight documentation, the proof of adultery, and his conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline, which got him banned from post, the judge was not amused. The divorce was granted on grounds of cruel and barbarous treatment and adultery. Dominic received nothing. Not a single cent of my retirement. Not a penny of my savings. He was just a name on a piece of paper. A week later, a letter arrived at my new apartment. It was from him. The handwriting was messy, desperate. I held it for a long time. I thought about all the sacrifices he claimed he'd made. I thought about the 8-hour line for the Pappy Van Winkle. I thought about the sound of his voice on the phone from Afghanistan. You chose your career over being a mother. I thought about his empty apologies, his manipulations. I stood up. I walked over to the new paper shredder I'd bought. I fed the unopened letter into the slot. The machine whined to life, and I watched as his words, his excuses, his last attempt to take up space in my head were turned into thousands of tiny, meaningless strips of paper. I emptied the bin into the trash. The boundary was set. It was final. The shredder's noise was the last sound of my old life. The silence that followed was the first sound of my new one. Time, for a soldier, is measured in assignments. My old assignment, being Dominic's wife, was over. My new one, my promotion to battalion command, was just beginning. A year and a half after I walked out of that conference room, I was no longer Major Dennis. It was Lieutenant Colonel Dennis. I was standing in a classroom at the Non-Commissioned Officers Academy, not as a student, but as a speaker. My audience wasn't a panel of colonels. It was a group of young, sharp, female captains, all hungry, all ambitious, all wondering how to navigate the complicated path I'd just walked. One of them, a smart young officer from the 82nd Airborne, asked a question. Ma'am, how do you handle it? When they, when they try to make you feel small, when they use your Emotions against you. I smiled. It was a real smile, soft and knowing. I looked at the faces in that room, the future of the army. They will, I said, my voice quiet but filling the room. They will try to tell you that you are too emotional. And when you show no emotion, they will tell you that you are too tough, too cold, a machine. They will try to put you in a box. Your job is to never, ever let them. I leaned against the podium. The world will wound you, I told them. That is a guarantee. Your armor won't always protect you. People you trust will let you down. You will fall. The wound is not the point. The wound is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your wisdom. I paused, letting them take that in. There's a saying from a very wise woman, Oprah Winfrey. She said, "Turn your wounds into wisdom." My project Gaslight was a wound. It was deep, and it was poisoned. I could have let it scar me over, made me bitter, made me afraid to trust. Instead, I chose to let it teach me. I learned the difference between loyalty and blindness. I learned that my value is not determined by my proximity to a man, but by my own integrity. I learned that true strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you get up, how you plan the counter-assault, and how you rebuild. So let them talk, I said. Let them call you names. And you just keep your eyes on your objective. Listen to your own internal compass, and turn every wound they give you into the wisdom you will use to lead. I finished my speech, and for the first time in my career, the applause that followed felt like it was truly for me. That spring, I received an invitation. It was cream-colored, simple. A wedding. Nathan Reed and Sophie. They had gone through with their divorce, as Sophie had said they would. The betrayal had been too deep. But as they worked through the legal process, and as Nathan went through intensive therapy and his separation from the army, they found their way back to each other. They were starting over, truly from scratch. The wedding was small, held in a quiet park in Fayetteville, far from the base. I went. I watched Sophie, radiant in a simple white dress, walk down the aisle. I watched Nathan, no longer in uniform, his eyes clear for the first time, watch her as if she were the only person on earth. At the small reception afterward, Nathan came up to me, his hands shaking slightly. "Ma'am, Lieutenant Colonel," he said, correcting himself. I don't know why you came, but it means everything." "It was a beautiful ceremony, Nathan," I said. He looked down, then met my eyes. His were filled with a shame that was old, but a resolve that was new. During my speech, he said, I told everyone what I did, what we did, and I told them what you did. I wanted you to hear this from me. I failed. I failed as a soldier, I failed as a friend, and I failed as a man. Your forgiveness, Megam. Your silence when you could have destroyed me. It's a gift I will never, ever deserve. I looked at this man. No longer the swaggering, joking dependa from that awful night. He was just a man, trying to repair the wreckage of his life. And I felt nothing of the old anger. It was gone. "You're right," I said softly. "You didn't deserve it. But I deserved to be free. And forgiving you? That was for me. Not for you." I smiled, a real, warm smile. "Congratulations, Nathan. Make her happy this time. She deserves it." He nodded, his eyes filling with tears. "Yes, ma'am." I turned from him and walked to the punch bowl. And I saw Linda Chin. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a bright yellow sundress. She was holding the hand of a new man, a kind-looking civilian engineer. She caught my eye, and her smile widened. She raised her glass to me. I raised my glass of lemonade back. The Survivors Club. We had all made it through. A few weeks later, my new life had settled into a routine. It was a Saturday. I was in my Army PTs, gray shirt, black shorts, having just finished a 5-mile run. I stopped at the Fort Bragg commissary to pick up groceries for the week. It was normal. It was mundane. It was perfect. I was in the produce section picking out apples, Honeycrisps, my favorite. I was checking one for bruises, thinking about the battalion training schedule for the next week. A cart squeaked nearby. Someone was stocking the shelves, restocking the ketchup bottles. I heard a sharp, choked noise. I looked up. It was Dominic. He was thin, gaunt even. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by the blue vest and name tag of a commissary stock clerk. He was pale, his hair was thinning, and his eyes were hollow. He was pushing a U-boat cart piled high with boxes. Our eyes met. The entire world just stopped. I saw panic flash across his face. I saw shame. I saw him open his mouth as if to say my name. And I just looked at him. There was no hate. There was no anger. There was no pain. There was just nothing. The ultimate indifference, the total, complete, and profound irrelevance of a commander looking at a stranger. I gave him a small, polite nod, the same nod I would give to any employee stocking shelves. And then, I turned back to the apples. I found a good one, crisp and bright red. I placed it in my basket and pushed my cart toward the next aisle, my mind already moving on to the next item on my list. I had a battalion to command. I had a mission to prepare for. I never looked back. He was just a ghost, in an aisle he no longer had the privilege to shop in. And I was finally, completely, and beautifully free. My story ends with that moment of peace in the commissary, that final, quiet victory. My journey was about turning wounds into wisdom and realizing that true freedom is indifference. But I know I'm not the only one who has walked this path. For everyone listening who has ever felt betrayed or underestimated, I see you. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to the channel. And in the comments, I want to ask you, what is one piece of wisdom you learned from your own wound? Thank you for sharing this space with me.